Jumping into a new MMO always comes with a bit of a learning curve. There's mechanics to learn, lore, storylines, metas, crafting, as well as one of the most important decisions you have to make. What class to play? We're the Bullet Sponges and we're back with a video on Guild Wars 2, where we take a look at different areas of the game and walk you through the ins and outs, giving you our thoughts along the way. And as always, if you feel like joining myself and Nex for more content, or simply want to support the channel, feel free to subscribe and join us each week as we review and play through all sorts of different co-op and multiplayer games. Today we're going to be having a look specifically at the classes in Guild Wars 2, with a focus on how they feel to play and what roles they can fill, rather than all of the nitty-gritty mechanics and guides on how you can actually play them. And this is really to help you decide what class you want to jump into based on how you personally like to play games, the experience that each of the classes in Guild Wars 2 will give you, and how you can match those two things as best as possible. Like almost all MMOs, choosing your class, or in the case of Guild Wars 2, your profession, is probably the most difficult decision you have to make. And many people who play these games still can't make up their minds and end up running loads of alts. But ultimately, the profession you choose to play will determine how you play the game for the long haul. In Guild Wars 2, there are currently a total of 9 professions to choose from, each of which has access to different weapons, skills and abilities. And within each class there are a number of specializations, which adds a bit of complexity when choosing the profession you want to play. So let's jump in and have a look at each profession one by one.
You might have seen our glowing review of Guild Wars 2 or even our guide to endgame activities. But what about those of you looking to play that aren't yet ready to look up the meta builds and strategies? Well, this one's for you. So where do we start? Every profession has a style unique to them, and it's really the general feel and capabilities we want to describe to players that are brand new to the game, to give you guys that holistic view of each one. First off, it's worth noting that you can choose any of the 5 playable races for any profession, with the only differences being a number of racial abilities that can't be used in PvP and don't get much, if any, airtime in PvE either. Also a personal story and home instance specific to that race, and of course the physical appearance, defining your character's default camera heights and visual scaling of armor and weapon size. So there's a balanced representation of 3 light armored professions, Elementalist, Mesmer and Necromancer, 3 medium armor, Ranger, Thief and Engineer, and 3 heavy, Warrior, Guardian and Revenant. All of these professions link to the game's predecessor Guild Wars 1 in some way or another, by either being the same profession or evolving into a new one described by the numerous lore surrounding the game. Each one has elite specializations that come in the form of a trait line that alters the profession to a particular playstyle, with a new choice of weapon over the core options and some unique features to that spec, with every profession getting 1 elite spec per expansion. For the purpose of this video, they'll be included as part of the general profession descriptions, due to just being a further method to customize your build if you choose to do so, and to keep the descriptions general enough for a newcomer. If there is a desire for detailed profession guides, let us know and that might just happen. The professions themselves, although fit particular themes and playstyles, are all capable of pretty much filling any role to varying levels of competence, so there's a lot of freedom to play them in whatever way works for you. So let's get started with the Elementalist. Master conjurers of water, earth, fire and air. The Elementalist is seen as one of the more versatile professions, a sort of jack of all trades. Baked into every weapon option is an attunement to each element that transforms your weapon skills to that theme. The weapon you equip defines your first 5 skills, and most classes can switch between 2 weapon sets during combat. Ellies are one of 2 professions that can only use 1 weapon during a single fight, but you can argue that due to their attunement system, they really have to juggle with the equivalent of 4 weapons. In a general sense, it means you always have the offensive options of fire and air attunements, and defensive through earth and water. Although you can build into one particular area, blast cannon, tank, support, etc., to make particular use of this profession, you'll need to efficiently rotate between your attunements to manage making the most of the cooldowns that are available. Because of this, an Elementalist player will be pressing buttons more often than most professions to fulfill their potential. This makes the Ellie a little more difficult to master due to the sheer number of skills available compared to other professions, but on the flip side they're quite dynamic to play and require a bit more micromanagement as they're quite rotation based. To every battle they naturally bring buffs to allies, elemental shields, and often ground targeted effects that you or any allies can combo their abilities with. Ellies bring mostly utility in their skill slots, with supportive effects that provide buffs as well as a range of interesting magic utility like a teleport, brief invulnerable state, and the ability to conjure temporary elemental weapons. Due to the nature of their available weapons, you can find an Ellie both in the thick of a fight with their sword and daggers, as well as hanging around the backline with single target options like the scepter or AoE with the staff. They also have great utility weapons such as the focus and warhorn. This might allow you to create an area that blocks all enemy projectiles or knock down enemy foes. The Mesmer is another light armoured profession that by theme focuses on deception through the utilisation of illusions like clones and phantasms, to constantly keep their foes guessing, followed by shattering them to apply damage or effects. This is a profession that is hard to truly understand until you actually start playing it. From the outside, it's hard to appreciate the mechanics that make up their playstyle, but in a general sense, you'll be building up these illusions and using shattering skills and mechanic unique to the Mesmer profession as part of your rotation. The upkeep and managing the replenishment of these illusions is key to getting the most out of your Mesmer. They are mostly focused on damage dealing and particularly from range through the use of weapons such as the ranged greatsword, staff, scepter and pistol, but there is a sword option that has brief usage in melee range. However, through an elite specialization called Necromancer, they have also made themselves one of the top tanking specs for PvE. The skills mostly revolve, as you may expect, around this core theme of deception, often generating clones as well as short shadow steps to various locations. But there are a number of utility options that can practically support the team too, for example by portaling them between two locations or stealthing allies. Necromancers, the final light armor profession, are focused on summoning the dead, consuming life force, and a number of other dark art related antics. Thematically, they're all about the undead life, with many visuals and ability connotations you'd associate with death. They're a very robust, self-sufficient profession that generally aims to gain life force, which manifests into core necromancer-themed forms, or abilities that drain life force when used. Depending on the spec you pick, this might be a spectral, ranged or melee DPS form, or the manifestation of AoE sand shades that support allies and damage enemies. The weapons feel mostly mid-ranged. It's not the kind of profession that can quickly pick people off, but offers many variations of consistent damage, and particularly through the spectral forms can leave you feeling quite tanky, even when building glass cannon. Although necros can be bursty at times, you can expect more fights of attrition, with a solid maintained output of either condition or physical damage depending on your build. For skills, a necro could be summoning minions, placing AoE fields, generating a number of negative effects on enemies, most of which tie into this life force mechanic in some way or another. To kick off the medium armor professions, let's talk about the Ranger, a profession based on their affinity to nature and survival. They always have a pet as baseline, with a large number of types you can tame yourself around the world of Tyria, with each type having their own abilities that the Ranger themselves can also use if they become one with their pet, using the Soul Beast Elite specialization. Known for their versatility, they make fantastic support healers through the Druid Elite spec, and reliable damage dealers due to their multitude of built-in survival options. Rangers, I would say, are one of the less mechanically demanding professions in a general sense, but there is plenty of complexity in its own way. The weapon options range from your melee greatswords, swords or daggers, right across to the ranged axe throwing, short bows and long bows. To suit their theme, they have a number of abilities that allow their pets to res allies or deal additional damage, set down powerful condition traps for unsuspecting enemies, and a good amount of personal survival skills too. A number of weapon skills are also themed around the qualities of animals, like a bear mauling or a swooping bird. There is always a profession like the Thief in an MMO, and there are always players that like the way a profession like this plays. The Thief focuses on the element of surprise with a multitude of movement utility, escapes from snares, and invisibility for that always moving in and out playstyle. With a low baseline HP and lacking in combat defensives, they are glass cannons by design, relying more on taking preemptive action to keep out of harm's way. In return, they're equipped with a high burst damage setup that keeps the profession interesting to play as they're always on their toes. They like to be in melee a lot, utilising a dagger, sword or even a staff to deal large amounts of damage with movement abilities attached, but they don't shy away from the bursty range options of pistols or the rifle elite specialisation either. All these options mean Thief currently deal great amounts of physical or condition damage when set up correctly. Their shortbow offers some nice ranged AoE and movement utility, useful in many areas of the game. One of the Thief's core mechanics is their use of initiative, a resource used for all of their weapon skills. This further encourages a reactive playstyle as their rotation doesn't rely on managing cooldowns, but saving initiative to spend at the right time. This lends to being able to dump initiative into high damaging abilities when need be, as the weapon skills cost initiative and have no cooldowns. Abilities will often have elements of stealthing the Thief and their allies, adding condition dealing poisons, mobility, or a series of traps. The Engineer, like the Ellie, is another profession that breaks the mold compared to the others. As the only other profession to have one weapon set to use during a fight, they tend to utilize equipment and gadgets to their advantage. This also lends to them being a jack of all trades type of profession too. Engineers have a tool belt providing additional abilities based on the skills you currently have equipped. They also uniquely have engineering kits, replacing your current equipped weapon with a new set of distinct skills. Therefore, similarly to Ellie's, the combination of the tool belt and kits can lead to requiring high amounts of button pressing. Engineers have this innate bruiser feel to them. Due to their kits, they have really decent self-sustain, and can therefore stay in the fight longer than you expect. The use of gyros, turrets, explosive kits, and utility like rocket boots gives this technological feel to the profession, and just allows them to bring something useful to any type of gameplay. They use weapons like pistols and rifles for range damage, and through elite specs can get access to hammers and main hand sword. Next we move on to the heavies, starting with the fantasy OG profession warrior. Masters of weaponry that have a huge number of physical weapons to pick from. Swords, greatswords, maces, hammer, longbow, rifle, you name it. They can really cover every style of combat effectively. They use a secondary resource called adrenaline, which is built up from attacking and can then be spent on their burst ability, which is generally hard hitting and depends on the weapon they have equipped. They are filled with great defensive utility, team-wide buffs through their banner skills, and CC like roots and stuns to chain with their many hard-hitting weapon attacks. This makes them really comfortable to play with fully offensive stats, as they can compensate with defensive stances and shouts to negate incoming damage. As a profession theme, you don't really see any magical effects on abilities. They're quite limited in fancy visuals and screen clutter. Instead, they personify just raw physical prowess, with a lot of innate value through their skills and high base HP, lots of valuable defensive abilities, and a really solid healing option that passively heals the warrior over time. Guardians fulfill that role of the Holy Warrior, inspired by a combination of the Paragon and Monk professions from the original Guild Wars, using a ton of strong defensive abilities to shield and heal allies to go with what is quite an offensive baseline kit. As with any holy type paladin professions, Guardians are often pulsing heavenly looking effects that naturally resembles the good guys. They're a relatively easy profession to pick up and have plenty of utility and support to be a decent contributor to the team. The profession utilizes a set of virtue abilities that have strong passive and active effects, like healing yourself passively over time and getting a 100% chance to block the next attack every 20 seconds. Skill-wise, they have a number of hard-hitting traps, can summon spirit weapons, and just have a load of general utility to boot. They don't have the best mobility in most of their kit, but can otherwise hold down a point incredibly well, due to the sheer number of defensives available, and if built right, have really impressive burst capability too. They have a good mixture of single target and AoE weapons through a combination of physical weapons like the greatsword, sword, mace and shield, and magical like the scepter and staff. And finally, we have the Revenant, one of the most unique professions in my opinion, and the newest one introduced to the game. They use a resource called energy, which they spend on their non-weapon skills. These skills are defined by their current invoked legend. Revenants can run 2 legends from Guild Wars lore history in their build, invoking one at a time to switch between their non-weapon abilities. These abilities are heavily linked to the nature of the invoked legend. So for example, the legendary assassin Shiro has mobility, stun break, and the ability to move and attack super fast. Whereas the legendary dwarf Jalis Ironhammer's strength lies in their defensive benefits like healing, immunity to CC, and condition removal. Because of this variety, the profession is extremely self-sufficient and has a lot of solo sustained damage too. Revenants utilize weapons like melee staff, mace and sword, and ranged options of a ranged hammer and short bow. They are strong mid-range fighters designed to hold the front line. Visually, the theme's around a place called the Mist, this sort of cosmic reality that makes up the existence of the world, which gives this sort of smoky spirit world aesthetic to them. While working through this video, it became really clear to us how well the professions have been designed to enable each one to cover the majority of roles and even playstyles, yet still offer elements that are unique to the professions themselves, so they don't all feel the same. Hopefully this helps show you a flavour of each one so you can take your first steps into Tyria with no regrets. Besides, if you're anything like me, you'll have one of each before you know it.
When it comes down to it, Guild Wars 2 really does give you a wide range of options when it comes to the playstyle and role that you want to go with. Each of the 9 classes has enough variation to broadly cover the traditional roles that you might have enjoyed from other games. And the addition of the specializations means that you have some further customization within your class and options to change your playstyle on the fly, which is really nice if you want to play something a bit different but you don't want to start a new character. Hopefully you found this video helpful and it helps you make a decision on which class you ultimately want to play in Guild Wars 2. Let us know in the comments your favourite class and whether or not you agree with what we've said about it. We're the Bullet Sponges and we will see you in the next one.